Today we have authors Bob Thurber, Carol Berg, and standing in for Jude Neale, we have Jessica Fabricius, aka JTF King. Starting off with Bob Thurber. Hi, Bob. How are you this morning?
I am just fine, and thank you very much for inviting me to this. This is great. I've never been on a YouTube channel before. I feel like I'm on a TV show.
You are. It's a very small TV show, but it's a TV show. So, for those of you who don't know, Bob is a master of flash fiction. He's a self-described unschooled writer with no degrees in anything. But you'd never guess that from his writing. He spent his early adult years working menial jobs and reading obsessively and studying the craft of fiction. So we've published him 3 times in pulp literature. The first one was in issue 3, which was Wager, and that was our introduction to Bob, and we just fell in love with his writing. We had another couple of very short pieces from him in issue 6, Beauty Takes Care of Itself, and some even shorter fiction. We put it all together and we called it a basket of short fiction. And then we published If You'd Like to Make a Call that was in 2016 in the autumn issue. And that one is actually now the title of his newest collection of short fiction. There you can see his 6 books up there. So he's a prolific writer. And you will also recognize that he is the judge of our Bumblebee Flash Fiction Contest and our Hummingbird Flash Fiction Contest. So for those of you who like entering contests, listen well. You're going to get to hear the master at work. So over to you, Bob. Oh, and I just passed the mic over as he's taking a sip of coffee.
Well, thanks for all that hype. All right, I'm going to read today a 1,000-word story called Beauty Takes Care of Itself. It was the editor's pick in the 2014 Hummingbird Flash Contest. I did not judge that one. And the story was published in issue 6, which came out, I think, in spring of 2015. Excuse me, I have to make some adjustments. Beauty Takes Care of Itself. 6 weeks out of rehab, just when things were beginning to turn around, I woke up stiff and sore on a park bench with the sun glaring at me from the worst possible angle. Curled tight on my side with no notion how I'd gotten there, all I could hear were the squeaks and squawks of early morning birds. And that shrill noise, combined with the blinding sun, knotted such pressure behind my eyes that it took me a full minute to fully focus and realize that the racket wasn't birds, but children. Crowded around me, twitching and chattering, were a dozen girls in sparkly, colorful dresses, all with garish makeup and complicated hairdos. They looked like munchkins dressed for the prom. Someone said, "Ladies, please." It was a man's voice, thick and deep. And fearing it was a cop, I sat up. The girls shrieked and scattered. "Whoa, ladies," the man said. He was crouched behind a camera mounted on a tripod. "Great, you woke him. Nice job." He removed his hand from the lens and stepped forward. He had long hair and a short beard. His arms were bare beneath a puffy vest with a dozen pockets. "Take 5, ladies. Nobody go anywhere." "Where's the bathroom?" said one of the girls. They had gathered into 2 groups, like teams huddled before a play. I felt sorry for them. Their pale necks appeared too delicate to support their embellished heads. "Hold your water until we're back at the bus," the man said, coming straight at me. His slanted expression distorted the shape of his beard. His baggy camouflage pants and rope sandals made him look like a commando Jesus. I avoided eye contact by staring at the girls. A few faces peeked, There were whispers and giggles, erupting in waves. "There's something, aren't they?" the man said, leaning uncomfortably close. "They're, excuse me, they're the finalists. We're supposed to be shooting over at the zoo, but they've experienced some kind of monkey problem. Dead baby chimp, I suspect." His shadow provided a softer view of the girls. "I'm breaking the rule shooting here. Meanwhile, I've got two worthless chaperones back on the bus, coconut oil on their feet." A big-eyed blonde, inches taller than the rest, timidly twirled her index into the hollows of her cheek. Without raising my arm, I wiggled my fingers in reply. "What's your name, sweetheart?" I said loudly. "Bernard," the man said. "People call me Bernie." "I wasn't talking to you," I said. "I'm sure you weren't, but I'd still like to shake your hand." He extended his arm. An oversized, complex-looking watch crowded his wrist. "Introduce me to that pretty one," I said. "Then I'll shake your hand." "No can do, I'm afraid." He sat down beside me. It was a long bench, big enough for 4 people unless any of them were fat. "How old?" I said. He hesitated. "Most are 9, some are 8. They look older, especially her." I pointed at the one I wanted to take home. She was staring intently like we were in some kind of contest. I strained not to blink. She seemed to be wearing less makeup than the rest. Finally, she did blink, or rather, her eyelids flooded and her mouth broke into a shy, radiant smile. "What are you thinking?" Bernie or Bernard said. Believing my immediate thoughts, "None of his business," I said. "They remind me of those fancy French pastries, all fluffy inside, but ruined by too much frosting." "Oh, they're a sugary bunch, all right." He shifted his feet. "Unfortunately, half these darlings will outgrow their cuteness, turn out mildly attractive at best. The true beauties will do okay, sure, finish college, marry into money, live comfortably ever after. Because beauty takes care of itself. But most are headed for a lifetime of self-image problems, self-esteem issues, depression, eating disorders." He shook his head in a self-congratulatory sort of way. "Statistically speaking, at least 3 will end up shallow, vain, heartless bitches." "Yummy," I said viciously. "Megan has an undeveloped bladder," shouted one of the girls. No, that's not what I said." "I'm bored," said another girl. "2 seconds, Bernie said. "Stop bickering." He stood up. "You homeless?" he said to me. "Do I look homeless?" "Honestly," he said, "it's hard to tell anymore." The sun was giving his head a fierce, dazzling glow. "No, I am not homeless." "I would have guessed the opposite," Bernie said. The pretty blonde touched 3 fingers to her mouth, puffed her cheeks, and blew a kiss. "Listen," Bernie said, leaning closer. "Before they woke you, I shot about a dozen frames. I don't know what I've got, if there's anything I can use, but do you want to sign a release?" "No." "Good, I don't have the forms with me. Can I offer you cash?" "How much?" $20. I nodded. "Super." He unzipped the vest pocket and reached in. He pressed a folded bill into my hand and said, "Nice doing business with you." I watched him jog to his camera, collapse the tripod's legs, and hoist the thing onto his shoulder all in one smooth motion. I fought the urge to call him back. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt my ears. He quickly caught up to the group, then hurried past them, signaling like a cavalry leader charging into battle. I swung my feet up and stretched out, quite proud of myself for not pulling my daughter's picture from my wallet, for not blurting out how I'd lost my precious darling to a vindictive ex-wife in a drawn-out custody battle, all because some dumb judge believed her ugly lies. At the rehab center, they have a courtyard with a stone chapel, a small friendly space with 2 stained glass windows and long pine benches where, on rainy days, patients are allowed to smoke. I'd sometimes sit and contemplate God's misjudgment of the world, all his miscalculations and bumbling oversights, convinced that any divine plan in no way included deadbeat dads or the devils who made them.
That was wonderful, Bob. I loved hearing that story read by you. It has so much. Stories have so much more meaning when the author reads them. I feel like it's just lovely and very sad, but beautiful at the same time. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I have a fondness, a personal fondness for that story.
So we're going to hold off on questions till the end. So I'm going to bring Jessica on stage very shortly. Just a reminder to our audience, if you do have any questions, pop them up in the feed and we will get to them at the end of the show. So coming on stage momentarily, we have, oops, thanks a lot, Bob, and stay around till the end. We have JTF King, who in her guise as Jessica Fabricius is one of our star editors at Pulplit, but she is also a writer under the name of JTF King, and she wrote a short story which we just love, and we never get tired of hearing her read. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Jess.
Thank you. I have it up here on my screen, so it might look like I'm actually giving eye contact, which
Cool.
wouldn't normally be the case. Right, so story is Late Night Fun Facts on the number 65. Zipper didn't own a car. Between rent, food, and a thick slab of debt, courtesy of a criminal justice degree that wasn't yielding any returns, she could barely justify not flushing her goldfish down the toilet. She walked the 2.5 miles to the law offices of Birnbaum and Packet every morning and took the number 65 bus home every night at the insistence, and with the funding, of her older sister. "There's some strange people out there, Zip. I'd hate to wake up to your face on the news," she'd said, balancing baby Bo on her hip. Norm rolled his eyes behind the Sunday paper. Zipper appreciated the solidarity, but they both nodded agreement under closer scrutiny from Clementine. Not that Zipper didn't agree. She'd seen plenty of strange people, even more so since she'd started taking the bus. So far, her experience had verged on only mildly uncomfortable, but her commute was short and she'd learned to appreciate that. Plenty of bus regulars were just that, regular, but there were a special few that made her glad for the invention of headphones. 2 weeks into her stint on the number 65, she'd managed to compile a reliable list of avoidables. The safest spot on the bus was by the front door, where no one could sit next to you. Plan B was to sit next to the lady with the massive chef knife, who was actually just an overworked mother trying to make use of her commute time. She never bothered Zipper, and her meal prep conveniently kept would-be weirdos at bay. Sure, Zipper worried about hitting a pothole and getting skewered, but there were worse fates. Zipper's day reliably began at 9 a.m., but depending on the attorney's workload, ended anywhere from 6 to 11 p.m. She didn't mind, and Sassafras the goldfish never complained. It meant overtime and gave her a good excuse to hit up the McDonald's across the street. Sometimes she stood outside the door of her apartment, paper bag in hand, and wondered what it would be like to have someone waiting for her on the other side of that door, but usually she was too tired. On one such night, she walked out of the law office at 10:43 and stepped on the number 65 bus, only to find it empty, save of course for the bus driver. Pleasantly surprised, she debated where to sit, came to the conclusion that Plan A was Plan A for a reason, and sat in the lone seat by the front door. She'd almost untangled her headphones when a voice startled her. "Strange, ain't it?" The bus driver smiled at her as he shut the door and tossed his thumb over his shoulder when Zipper didn't respond. No one riding, I mean. Oh, yeah, I don't mind, Zipper said, her fingers lost in a knot. She'd never actually spoken to the driver. It crossed her mind that was rude. Can't say I blame you, he said. Plenty strange folks, especially late at night. Think you can count yourself lucky. Yep. Zipper offered a weak smile and bent her head to the knot that had confounded her attempts to escape conversation. I could write a book on some of the things I've seen driving this bus as long as I have. He got no response from Zipper, but went on. Of course, strange is a matter of relativity. Relative to some people I've seen, the bus ain't strange at all. Say, you work at the law office? Zipper tried not to seem startled. She'd been riding the bus now for almost 2 months. He'd probably seen her come out the front door at least once, and what else did he have to do besides observe and make deductions about public transportation patrons? Is that about 5 minutes?
That was great, Jess. That was about 5 minutes. And if you want to find out how much stranger that ride on the 65 number 65 bus gets, you can find it in issue 22 of Pulpit. So I am going to just keep going here and just let me get Carol set up on. My software is being a little bit laggy here. And while I'm waiting for it to upload, I will just read you Carol's bio. So Carol Berg, I'm sure most of you have seen or heard or read her before. She's a former software engineer who never expected to become an award-winning author, but her 17 epic fantasy novels have won national and international awards, including multiple Colorado Book Awards and the Mythopoeic Fantasy Award for Adult Literature. Her newest novels are fantasy adventure Chimera novels from Tor Books, written under her alternate ID of Kate Glass. Most recent is A Conjuring of Assassins, and I will bring that up on the screen for you shortly. Carol/Kate lives in Colorado at the foot of the Rockies, and she wrote a Uncanonical Murder for Pulp Literature issue 10, and I am going to hand the mic over to Carol now.
Okay, I'm here. All right. I have always loved mysteries. And a mysterious death, an interesting detective, and a trail of logic and clues can set me up for a great afternoon reading. When I began my novels of the Collegia Magica, I decided to merge my two favorite genres. So The Spirit Lens, the first book of the Collegia Magica, is a murder mystery set in my own version of the Age of Reason, where failing magic is being challenged by science, reason, and exploration. So the story that I read today is a murder mystery set in that same world, different characters, and it's 3 years prior to the opening of the series. Uncanonical Murder. Can you see his ring, Constable de Payen, and the family mark on his hand? Turn him over, I called down the hill. Somewhere the Soul Eater's demons broke into hilarity at my life's crumbling aspirations. Eno rolled the bloody corpus to its back, and even from where I stood atop the barren hillock, the morning light made it clear. Matters were far worse than I feared. 3 months, 3 corpses, 3 murders. My boots skidded unsteadily as I picked steps down the rocky slope to join my deputy. I should have brought the damnable walking stick. But such an obvious sign of frangibility undermined a high constable's authority, especially when he was new to his post. Bardieu had seemed a perfect first posting for a man hoping to secure his future by serving the king's law. But its reputation as a quiet district with no crime worse than drunkenness or a false measured weight had quickly proved a lie. The first two deaths had been easily solved, though. I had remanded the guilty parties, a vengeful cuckold and an idiot determined to inherit his father's prized pig, to our Lord's magistrate before the coroner could even be summoned from Ventina. But this third would surely excuse my ambition, for the desperate play it was. The black-inked crest that marked the back of the dead man's left hand named him an acknowledged member of a blood family, a sorcerer. The heavy gold signet ring named that family noble. Bad enough. But the plain silver band now visible about his neck sent my pleas arrowing skyward in hopes a host of merciful angeli hovered over this backwater of ignorance and superstition. It was a mage of the Camarilla Magica lay dead in this arid ravine. The corpus had lain there a few days, long enough to loosen its rigor, dry the clotted blood, and darken its complexion, long enough for vermin to gnaw at its cheeks. He had been a robust man of middling years. The stitching of his doublet, the cut of his breeches, and the fine leather of his boots bespoke the status one would expect. A Camarilla mage. Shite. 2 years past, the Camarilla had used whips, clubs, and knives to persuade me that a piece of my soul did not exist. A small piece, to be sure, wholly untrained and mostly unexplored. A talent for perceiving enchantments and using will and intent to influence spells others had worked. Uncanonical magic, they called it, for no bloodline crest marked my left hand. My veins did not carry the blood of a god's gifted family. I could not craft any new enchantment from the 5 divine elements: air, water, spark, base metal, and wood. I could just consider how a spell might be altered, and sometimes I could change it. But not anymore, not for 2 years. I had turned to the civil law for my livelihood, hoping to climb out of the Camarilla's reach. And here I was, thrown into their path again. Someone would die for this crime. Only the murderer, I hoped. Mayhap it's a natural death, whispered the burly Eno. He understood what danger the silver collar meant, if not my personal gut-shrinking terror. No wound showing, no weapons left lie. Knots pierced his garments or sliced his neck. No, not at all natural. Gouts of blood clotted the man's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. His fingernails were split and clogged with gore as though blood had spurted from his fingertips. Pull off his boots, I said. As I'd guessed, the mage's toenails were split and caked with blood, too. Even more telling, his hose were ripped ragged about his ankles. Eno peeled away the stiffened wool, exposing raw bands of shrinking skin. He were bound. My deputy yanked up the man's blood-stiff sleeves. Raw flesh marked a ring about each wrist as well. Hand and foot. No sign of a grapple disturbed the rock-strewn ravine, nor was there visible evidence of fire bursts or defensive magics. A formidable sword at the man's side remained undrawn alongside a sheathed dagger. If he saw his assailant, he certainly felt no threat. A common thief would have to be both clever and lucky to overcome a powerful sorcerer, find a mage sleeping or distracted by something else, a purposeful distraction perhaps, and it could be done. Were blankets of a fire visible anywhere close, I might admit such a tale. So his boots were put back on him after he bled, I said. Likely the weapons, too. Murder, unquestionably. And for certain done elsewhere. Despite the copious blood on him, none stained the rock or stubbled grass. What's killed him, Saint-Cyr? I'd call it Venus explosion. No experience or study of mine suggested what could cause such. I'd only just begun to review anatomical charts and treatises on wounds and diseases to aid in my adopted profession. This fit no pattern I'd learned. Fetch your mule cart, I said. We'll stow him in your byre while we send for the verger. Everything must be absolutely correct. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Carol. That was wonderful. I love hearing that story again. This is such a treat for me because, like Bob and Carol have never been to one of our launches, so we've never heard them read live because they live in the States, of course. So it's great to finally hear these stories that we bought long ago come to life again. Just a reminder that you can find all sorts of Carol's work in bookstores everywhere, I would assume, and her new series under Kate Glass, Conjuring of Assassins. So, Carol, tell me, why did you decide to change your name for this series, this new series?
Always a good question. Um, Actually, when I came up with this idea for this is sort of an episodic series about a team of sorcerers in a world where sorcery is forbidden. Um, and it's sort of different from my previous work, which tended to be 2, 3, or 4 book series that each comprised a whole story, but they comprised one big story as well. And so it's also a different publisher, Tor Books instead of Penguin. And they asked, I thought it was good, after the contract had been signed, they asked if I would consider a pseudonym, an open pseudonym, so it's okay for everyone to know. And they thought that this kind of series, rather than an author moving from one publisher to another, that it would give it a boost if it was presented as a debut, and it qualify, a lot of different programs. So that they thought it would get more attention and help widen my audience from just those who'd read me before. So that's essentially why it happened. And I said, okay, sure, let's give it a try. And as long as it's open, so my current readers will know where I am and that I'm not being idle.
Well, that
So
brings
that's
me
the story.
that brings me to the next question is, what are you working on right now?
Well, actually, this morning I pushed the button and sent in the third of these books. So the first of the Chimera books, it was An Illusion of Thieves. And then there's this one that just came out in February. And the third one is A Summoning of Demons. And so that one, I just sent in the revised manuscript this morning. So I'm not sure what's going to come next. Actually, as I was reviving this story, bringing it out of my archives to read some of it, I thought, when I wrote it, I said, oh, I would love to write some more stories about Hugh and his difficulty, this poor guy who's aspiring to be a constable just so he won't get beaten up again. And starting out in this small town, and of course, as we know, small towns in detective stories, they end up with a lot of weird murders. So, so I'm thinking maybe I'm going to take a little time before I decide, before I start on a fourth Chimera book. I might take a little time and write another Hugh de Payen story. We'll see.
Oh, well, we'd love to see that.
Maybe.
I'm going to bring our other authors on because I have the same question. Sue asked this question from all of you. So, what are you working on now? So, I'll hand over to Bob. What are you working on now?
Oh God, what am I working on? Well, I'm actively involved with 4 real projects. One of them is older than my adult son. It's had about 3 decades of research because it's that intricate. It actually requires a bookshelf of its own. So when that comes out, you can say, oh, I heard about that book a long time ago, but he wouldn't say much because I'm always hesitant to talk about anything that's not completed. I haven't told the story yet, so I don't like to tell about the tale. It's almost like pre-gossip. So
Right.
I'll leave it there and just say that I'm constantly working on one of these 4 projects or just screwing around trying to create something out of thin air.
Well, it's a pretty amazing something that you got out of thin air. So, and Jess, what are you working on now?
Well, I always kind of have memoir pieces spinning in the back of my head. they tend not to form until quite a bit of time has passed. So this corona stuff should provide some fodder for that. I'm also, I don't know if I should say it, but I will. I'm thinking of a graphic short. It's at the storyboard stage, I guess.
Ooh, that's enticing. Well, I'd love to see that. All right. Well, we are out of time. Thank you so much, all three of you. And for those of you listening live, the video will be up in replay this afternoon if you missed any of it. And I will put links